My name is George Hatch. I'm actually new to the technical specialist role as well. Dusty and I actually started the same day. I've been with Autodesk for a year, just over a year and a couple months. I was actually with Enterprise Services, so it's a little complicated, but basically we have Enterprise Services. It's a service offering that is purchased. It's kind of like souped up support on steroids. So beyond just product support of issues, we became really involved at a root level with our enterprise level customers. Okay, so they would basically get an account team and then a designated specialist, and that specialist would cover all support issues for that account and really would be helping with proactive support. So seeing the problems before they actually happen. So I'm a genie, okay? So I did that for a year, just over a year, but my degree is actually in architecture. My industry experience is GIS and civil engineering, and I actually have 2 years of thermodynamics mixed in there. So I'm kind of a weird duck. I've got this breadth of different industry experience, but it really all derived from this passion around software. I love playing with all the buttons and pushing the buttons and seeing them do cool things. But more importantly, I really loved, being a designer for so many years, both on the architect side and on the civil engineering side. I really loved being able to see what was such a laborious process in the past become easier. Easier and have a deliverable that made sense for our customers. So now with Autodesk, I love the role because I get to point out all the cool new software, right? So we've got Infraworks, and that's the topic of the day. Yes, it is about suites. It is about taking this toolbox of products and figuring out what's going to be best for the situation. And, I'm going to talk about using some of those tools, but when we talk about Infraworks, it's brand new. Not a lot of people are using it, and if they are, they're excited. They're excited. They're in there. They're trying to use Infraworks and not sure about what's available and how I can use this specifically for architectural presentations. It's great on the roads and highways side, but I think that it has a place for architects, and that's kind of why I started to put this together. And I say start to put this together because honestly, there's a lot more that I want to get into. So what I'm going to do is over the next week, 2 weeks, I'm going to continue to build on this presentation and do a project, soup to nuts, and to provide it to CTC so that you guys can have that as a resource, both for training and for just your own education. So. Oh, I forgot I put an image in there, but I'm going to skip to my coffee cup because I stole this, okay? Now, if I were to ask everyone in the room to draw a coffee cup for me, it would probably look something like this, right? Okay, so we've got all these coffee cups. I stole this concept from someone and to prove a point. Now, if I said, okay, draw a coffee cup and put a road next to it, this is probably something that I would get from everyone in the room. And I was joking yesterday, I'd probably be worse than this guy here. Actually, I forgot I have this. Yeah, so I'd be worse than him. Because as far as my sketching skills, that's why I use a computer. Okay? What's the point of this? And why do I show you those two slides? Well, if I ask you to draw a coffee cup and draw a road, none of you did that. Okay? And the point is that this is two-dimensional. This is totally two-dimensional. If we were to look at those other examples, they're all perspective type views. Okay? This isn't. In fact, I think that it's wrong because this is plan view and this is profile view. So technically it should be a circle with like a little line coming out the side, right? But no one would typically draw that. Okay? So I think you probably see where I'm going here. We've had this workflow for years where we have projects that exist in reality, this three-dimensional space, and that extends to beyond 5 feet outside the building. Okay, but it's not something that we've really taken into consideration for the 3D, the BIM process. And yesterday I was joking, we did a version of this yesterday as well. And Dusty and I hate saying BIM because, well, it's said too often. But honestly, this is a process that is useful. So, because our projects exist in reality, they could be utility, municipal, land development, corridor studies. This is for architects, so leave out the oil and gas. But you could be an architect that works for Exxon, and you're doing the building work for one of their plants. So maybe you're using Plant and Revit and MEP and Infraworks and Civil 3D, and we can go down the long list. Okay, so the point is these projects exist in our world, and we don't draw that in 2 dimensions. However, that's been the workflow for years. If we were to think about that process, what if we could add value to that process by designing on data that was available to us for free on the internet? Real world data. We talk about GIS. The term GIS is scary to those that have never used it. I'm going to hopefully work through some of that fear today. Dusty did a great job talking about all the places we can get data in GIS. But what if we could also evaluate, take that real data in our design and evaluate the whole project, not just the building and not just the site, but the project as a whole, because it does encompass beyond 5 feet from the building. And then what if we could analyze? I don't have images here, but you get the point. What if we could analyze? I'm going to get into some more details about analyzing our project. Dusty was, talking about roadway optimization and earthworks, but analyzing your site could be shadow studies. It could be, field of view studies. It could be a lot of different things, and gathering that kind of data into any other platform can be time-consuming and monotonous. So, and then communicating your design. Okay? Now, everything that I've talked about up until now, you're probably in your head saying, yeah, we totally have been doing that for years, but you probably haven't been doing it in the planning phase, right? You probably haven't been doing that 3D visualization, high-end rendering, and analysis work before you won the job. You were likely just putting together these, Dusty was showing, I'm stealing those images, by the way. Dusty was showing those images of all the storyboards, set up in a planning office, a planning board meeting or a conservation commission, and that's the way that we put together our rudimentary data that we have to convey our concept, to win the project. Maybe it's some GIS data, maybe it's a couple of aerial photos. But I'm going to skip that slide because I want to get into some of the details here. If we talk about the BIM process, we have. I like that we switched and we have a new image because it looks cooler. But it's the same circle that we've had for years. And I'm sick of seeing that specific circle. But it is a process that has value that needs to be shared. It needs to be adopted beyond. Notice that building right there sits on grass and road and it's got trees and it's next to a highway and it's next to all this industrial work because it sits in the real world. So the BIM process doesn't stop right there. It doesn't stop with Revit. It doesn't stop just with Civil 3D. We can utilize Infraworks in the preliminary process of our design. Okay. So what are some challenges to this 2D world that we've lived in? You know, there's the obvious 2D, 3D communication issue. Dusty showed a slide, you know, it's a lot easier to look at a 3D visualization of a project than it is 2 dimensions. And not only is it easier, but I skip right down to this. I added $signs because that's the bottom line. When we're talking about conceptual design, like I've mentioned many times, that's to either win the job or gain public approval at the very beginning of a job. And sometimes, depending on the project, you haven't even been paid yet. That's all overhead. And as little time as possible can be spent during that process, that's where we want to go. So right now, to come up with multiple designs for the beginning portions of your project costs a lot of money. It costs money because you've got to take your design team, put them on building these concepts, and those concepts, as we discussed, come from many different forms. They could be the storyboards, it could be just 2D plans, it could be napkin sketches, they could be a lot of different things, but it costs money. And the reason that we don't do many designs is because it costs money. But what kind of value could we offer to our customers if we could still use some of the same resources more efficiently and come up with more options for them? Okay? Or come up maybe with some better educated options. I've been in a design situation where I thought I had like a really great idea, okay? We had 3 proposals. I had a 4th proposal that I really wanted to add to the mix, but it was going to take some time for me to put that together. And I've had a project manager just shoot it down and say, you know what? We've got these 3. I agree your 4th would probably be a good option to give them, but we can't afford it right now. Don't add it. Just give them the 3. And that's what it was. But in the reality, that 4th probably, if it had worked out the way I thought, probably would have saved them a lot of time and aggravation in the long run. And more so, it was a major construction issue down the road that I was trying to resolve with that 4th concept. But we didn't have time or the budget to do it. So, and then public buy-in. Public buy-in can be anything. My grandmother lives I'm from the Northeast. I cover the Northeast territory. My grandmother lives in Maine. And she's the kind of lady that is going to go to all zoning board meetings, period. She's going to go to the conservation meetings just because she wants to pick a fight. Because she doesn't understand what's really going on with a project. And if she, my grandmother, can be loud enough, she can cause a lot of issues in the approval process, because all it takes is one person. I'm sure all of you have worked with people in an office. You get one person that doesn't get buy-in on a specific thing, that one person can cause a lot of destruction, and that's true with public buy-in as well. Okay, so but what if you could convince my grandmother or convince that one zoning board member that this could be a really great option, and that it's not as intrusive, it's not as publicly offensive as what they perceive those 2D plans look like. Because the people in this room, we all have looked at 2-dimensional plans, we've all looked at construction documents, we've all looked at storyboards, we've developed them. Of course we know them, but there are many people that don't, and they are stakeholders in our projects. So this is the process. We've got these meetings, we've got these deliverables, they're aerial photos. This is their project 1, project area 2, and that, I guess that, compared to what we did 30 years ago, that does speak volumes, but we have better options. And then you get all these questions. Man, I think of how many in this room have been to public hearings of any sort? Okay. So in those public hearings, it's public. Anyone can go. think of all the questions that you've heard at those public hearings. It could be everything to, if I sit on my back deck, am I gonna see that highway? Am I gonna see your, your project going on at the university down the street? Is it going to affect me? Is it going to affect my world? Because I like my world the way it is, and I want it to stay that way. And everyone in this room probably feels the same way. I want my world to stay the way that it is as well. So if I can be convinced by a 3D representation of that project, it makes more sense. So in order to do that, though, we've got all these different, Dusty used the word aggregator. Infraworks is a great aggregator. Well, it is a great aggregator. It's a place to put multiple sources of data into one location and use that data effectively. So when we talk about this, it could be land development, GIS data, engineering data, and architectural data, whether it's Revit files or SketchUp files or we can, Inventor files. I mean, the long list goes on. We can import pretty much anything. And I'll tell you this, when it comes to importing file formats, this state has, I looked on their website 2 days ago, Sunday night actually, and you have a ton of LiDAR scan data, okay? Well, it's in LAZ format, and I don't want to get too detail-oriented here. Those of you that are not familiar with LiDAR and scan data and file formats, but all that is a file format for a point cloud, okay? And it's a compressed file format. LAZ doesn't import necessarily, or at all, into most of our products. LAS does, and it just so happens that there's a free LAZ converter tool online. So what I did was, I'll show it to you later. I'll probably open up Recap because it's cool. I downloaded all of Minneapolis in the LAZ files, converted them within minutes to LAS, and imported them into Recap. And now I have an entire laser scan 3D model of all of Minneapolis. All right, so what's the value there? What do I care about that? Well, the state, I noticed, doesn't have it doesn't have building footprints. When we talk about data, you can only put in the data that's available to you. So yes, you can use Google Info. I personally can't use Google Info because I don't have a license to Pro, and I can't give you a model that I built from those Google. There's licensing issues there, it's complicated. But you can use Google, or you can use this laser scan data and get a representation of that information into Infraworks. But the point is, we can pull it from many different places. And the result is this, we put together all this data from all these different sources and talk about a real project in a real world. This is actually done in Las Vegas. It's a golf course. So, this is a Revit building that was designed. These were all, there was waterways already here, and they did some manipulation, to shape some of those waterways, including these bridges, who golf carts. Who golfs in this room? Okay. So I like to golf, but I'm the kind of golfer that likes to smoke a cigar and drink beer and really do very little golfing. So I would have too much fun on the bridges with the golf carts, okay? But this is a real project. It's in a real world, and we've got data pulled from many sources. So I'm skipping that. Let's talk about the first. You bring in all this data, what do we do with it? I've actually heard many, many times talking to customers about Infraworks, going through a live demo with them, and they flat out said to me, is this Google Earth? And it's a good comparison except for this one gigantic fact. It is not Google Earth, first off, and second off, Google Earth is an environment where I put my design into their environment, and it's ultimately controlled there. Whereas Infraworks is an aggregator that I control. I decide what kind of data is pushed in. I decide what kind of GIS information, whether it's utilities or surface data that was surveyed, okay? Maybe we go out, we do a preliminary survey, do surface data that is more detailed than the DEM data that we pull that into Infraworks. I control the environment, including the design. So that's the gigantic difference. And it's pretty simple, to do all these sketches. And I'm going to go into Infraworks and do some sketches and put in some Revit buildings and show you all that. But the create phase is a simple process. And this data, as we've talked about, can come from many different sources. But where do we get it? And I want to get rid of this whole slide and just say where do we get stuff, and then put Google across. Because Google, just Google, Minneapolis GIS, that's all I did. And then I got all these sources, DNR, I think, is it DNR? So DNR has all these, resources that you can download GIS data. In fact, somebody said yesterday in the audience, they said, oh man, it's so overwhelming. There's so much data there. I didn't even know where to start. In my opinion, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, especially if you work in an area over and over and over again. You know where that data is coming from. You know what data is available to you, and then you just reuse that. But hold on, we're building a model from the data. So let's say we work on a project that is in downtown Minneapolis. We build a model for that project, and then next year, 6 months later, we're doing another project in the same city. We'll just take that model, and now you're getting a return on the investment for the model, not just through the long life cycle of the project itself, but you're getting a return on that investment for the next project, and you're saving even more time. Okay? So these are just a couple of different sources. In fact, probably I'll give a more detailed list, but it is based on local information. Okay, I found that the detail of the imagery is a lot better local than it is on Google. And then visualization. Okay, so if we can visualize this model in 3D, you asked earlier about can I get rid of the road or get rid of the surface and see subgrade data? That's all that was done here, was a coverage area put over the road, and then you can see the utilities. It's really simple. And if you want to simulate the actual ditch there as well, then you just pull this data, export it into Civil 3D through IMX, and just do a quick corridor that shows the ditch, and then bring it back in, and then you'll have actually grading underneath the pipes, to show that information. It's pretty simple process. And then analyze. So there are certain things within the analyze toolbox that are only available through Ultimate, but like I said, this is going to be talking about thematic maps and line of sight and vertical optimization. The analyze side of this process, conceptual design process, is like one of those plus ones for me anyway. Most of us weren't doing any real analysis work in the conceptual design. So we weren't necessarily taking into consideration a more detailed look at the cost of a project, optimizing that project, not just based on location and what's going to impact, what we're going to impact with that project, but also grading, volumes, and things like that at the conceptual design process. But we can do that with Infraworks. And I gotta tell you, before this role, I worked in our Waltham office, and it just so happened, actually, this isn't a coincidence, I found out that the user design experience people were in Waltham on the 3rd floor in a specific, area. And I intentionally moved my desk so that I was like right, literally a cube away from their UX designers. So every time they would be having brainstorming sessions and going over intersection tools and other optimization tools that aren't existing quite yet. I've seen them and they exist, but who knows what they may be. I got to have my input. I get to walk over and say, well, you know what? For intersections, we really want to be thinking about the T-bones. I'd love to add that. I'd love to add a more detailed level of user experience to lane widenings and medians, and it was great. But I got to tell you, from the inside looking out, this is the fastest developed product that I've ever seen, ever. We talk about Civil 3D updates. If you were to look at Civil 3D, I mean, in its life cycle, even at the beginning when Civil 3D was brand new and rapidly being developed, I would compare that and at least triple it. We have teams working on Infraworks development globally 24 hours a day. They're working in China, they're working in Waltham, they're working in Waltham, Mass. They're working in California, they're working in New Hampshire, all on Infraworks to get Infraworks growing, because they want to provide you with a tool that is comprehensive and is going to give a value to you. So that's all I'm going to say about optimization. There's a lot more coming down the pike. Get ready. You're going to be excited. And I've heard for years, I wish there was a Civil 3D, Revit, combo something, and there'll never be a replacement. I don't think that Civil 3D is going to be, overshadowed by Infraworks, but I do see there being a marriage there that has already started, and they both will have their place. So the value of a model. What time do we have till here?
We can have until 12 if you want. I mean, up to the people, but we have the seminar until 11:30, scheduled until 11:30.
Okay.
But because you guys had 90 minutes, but if you want to ask the audience if they want to stay for another half hour, that's fine. We got the room.
We don't have to do a half hour. We can do questions for a half an hour.
Okay, that's fine.
Half of you probably took the whole day and are going golfing this afternoon, so I don't want to get into that time. I hope I didn't offend anyone. So the value of a model, yes, we talked about the value of a model, but truly utilizing that model in the life cycle. One thing that I haven't brought up is that project that you start, if you're going to utilize Infraworks and model the project, that doesn't end when you win the job and you start over again. That's the greatest value, in my opinion. It's not just visualizing and winning the job. It's being able to take that information, all that work, and use it instead of throwing it out and starting over again now that we have the job. So with Infraworks, we can take, that is really the value of a BIM model. It's through the life cycle of the design process. Okay, and that doesn't end at construction. It does end at manage, which is a forever thing, right? So if it's utility work, then that utility work is getting passed on to the local municipal authority for that utility, ideally. Okay, and I'll tell you, I've seen many DOTs, state DOTs, and municipalities. I'm in the Northeast, and there's a lot of adoption. I've got meetings, for the next 3 months with many municipalities that are ramping up to make it a requirement that GIS data and BIM models, where possible, are submitted as part of the submission process. They're making a requirement because they see the value of having the data behind the design.